Bless you. Bless you. All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors. So thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves. Our daf Yomi share Meretz Hashem in honor of or in memory of Mr. Milton Martyr Mordechai David Ben Rafala Cohen Zichron Levracha. To thank the Elbaum family for dedicating over Sherman Drushos this month in memory of Jerry Elbaum, Yaakov Couple, Ben Rav Avram Menachem. To thank our week of learning sponsors, Paul and Kathy Pollack, and the Solicitor Refuah Shlema Mafora by David Cancer of David HaKohen, Ben Leah, and Saeed and Sima Haken for dedicating the week of learning the Ilui Nishmas Sima's parents, Miriam Bas Elazar, and Yecheskel Ben Aga Sela. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, the families in Nechama, and all those who require a refuah should have one together with Kol Chole Yisrael. Also with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Ayin Zayin. Really great Gemara today. 77. So we're actually picking up right on the top of the daf. If you remember again, I don't want you to forget the end of yesterday's daf, which we'll come back to Meretz Hashem and the Rambam towards the end of the shir. So if you remember again, I will say the Gemara transitioned to a seemingly unrelated topic. The common thread was Rav Chia. So remember again, the Gemara was talking about the idea that these great Rabbanim were annulling vows while preoccupied with other activities, right? Based on the idea that they felt that Hataras Nedarim could be accomplished through simple charata, and simple charata is just remorse. So it doesn't require really any real work on the part of the Chacham to find a Pesach, to find an opening. All it requires is genuine remorse on the part of the vower to go ahead and undo the vow. Therefore, again, Chia Barav is shooting his arrows, right? Rabba is sometimes sitting, sometimes standing, kind of doing his own thing, right? And ultimately, again, it's not a problem because all they need to do is listen to the remorse of the vower, and all is good. Fine. So we'll say, so keep that on the side, and let's go back to the top of Ayin Zayin. Tanan Hasam. We'll say very interesting Gemara. Tanan Hasam. Mefirin Nedarim b'Shabbos, v'nish'alin l'Nedarim she'en l'tzorach Shabbos. So we'll say, so remember again, just to reframe our terms, we have Hafaras Nedarim and Hataras Nedarim. Hafara refers to the process of revocation that a husband and a father could do for a wife/daughter, versus Hatara, which represents the ability of a chacham to go ahead and revoke the neder. Again, we'll discuss which is revocation, which is annulment, right? Even though again we've been using those terms interchangeably throughout this entire time, but we'll probably be better off using hatara as annulment versus hafara as revocation. Because we'll say again, just to frame that for just a moment, right? Because remember again, a father and a husband have the ability to literally revoke the neder, right? They could go ahead and pull it back. They could say, no, that's not a neder. As opposed to a chacham who doesn't really have the ability to revoke. He has the ability to help the vower annul the neder. Okay, so in any event, the Mishnah says as follows: Mefir nedarim b'Shabbos, finish annul nedarim, shem l'tzarach Shabbos. So what can you do? You can go ahead and do hafaras nedarim on Shabbos, and ultimately, again, you could do nish annul nedarim. You could do hataras nedarim if there is a Shabbos need. If there's a Shabbos need. So I will say, if you notice, the wording here is very interesting. It sounds like hafaras nedarim could be done on Shabbos no matter what. And hataras nedarim, that's nish'alul nedarim, you could go ahead and annul a neder if what? If it serves some type of Shabbos purpose. Take a look at the Ran for just a moment. The Ran is on top of Ayin Zayin. Mafir nedarim ba'al ishto v'nish'alin nedarim l'chacham. Fine. So the Gemara asks the kasha. What's the kasha? So the Gemara says, Mafir nedarim b'Shabbos l'tzorach haShabbos, ol dilma afilu shelo l'tzorach. Shabbos say, here's the interesting question. When we say, because right now, remember again, we're still in the topic of hafara, right? That's really our primary topic over here. The ability of a husband or a father to go ahead and annul the vows to revoke the vows of a wife/daughter. So we'll say, see, here's the shaila. So let's just play this out. Reuven's married to Rachel, right? Rachel makes a neder on Shabbos. So now again, Reuven has the power of hafara. Reuven has the ability to go and revoke the neder. So when we say that he could revoke a neder on Shabbos, what type of nedarim does that refer to? Is that the tzorech HaShabbos? Does that mean like this, that he could revoke a neder if the neder itself has Shabbos implications? Or maybe he has the ability to revoke a neder, even if what? Even if it doesn't have Shabbos implications. So I'll just give you a very simple example. So if she made a neder and she said, you know what, I'm not going to drink wine. I'm not going to drink. Okay, so not drinking wine has Shabbos implications, right? As opposed to a neder that I'm not going to, I'm not going to visit China, right? So again, so that's fine, but that neder doesn't have any Shabbos implications. So we'll say, very interesting shaila. So does the license for hafaras nedarim, does that allow for neder revocation on Shabbos itself? I'm sorry. So for hafaras nedarim, does that allow for revocation on Shabbos if the neder had? Say differently. Does the neder need Shabbos implications in order to allow for afara on Shabbos or not? So we'll say that's the shayla. Oh, Dilma, or maybe not. Maybe the power of revocation is such. I will say that Allah Lamaisa, whether the neder has Shabbos implications or not, the neder itself can be revoked on Shabbos. So let's analyze. So the Gemara says as follows: Ditani Tashma, Ditani Rav Zuti Debeid Rav Papi, Ein Mefirin Nedarim El Litzorach HaShabbos. Shabbos says, so what happens? So here it seems to be pretty explicit. Rav Zuti, the Beid Rav Papi, says you can only annul Nedarim on Shabbos or revoke Nedarim on Shabbos if they have a tzorech for Shabbos. So the ability of a husband to revoke his wife's Nedarim, the ability of a father to revoke his daughter's Nedarim on Shabbos can only be done if the neder itself has Shabbos implications. Amar Rav Ashi says, here's the problem. Halot nan hachi. Our Mishnah does not support this reading, right? Our Mishnah does not support this reading. How so? Listen to this, Rabbi Say. So, Nadra im chashecha. What did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said, Rabbi Say, remember again, Rabbi Say, our Mishnah was talking about something a little bit different, right? Our Mishnah was highlighting the time frame in which a person has for hafaras nedarim. So remember again, the Mishnah said hafaras nedarim kol hayom. You right, the husband has the ability to be made for his wife's neder, father to daughter, the entire day. What does entire day mean? What does entire day mean? Calendar day. So the Mishnah said, so sometimes you have more time, sometimes you have less time. So remember again, the example Rabbi say that the Mishnah gave was what? A woman makes a neder, a wife makes a neder, belele Shabbos. Right? She makes a neder on Friday night. So what's the halacha? How long does the husband have for neder revocation? The entire Friday night, throughout the entire Shabbos. So nadra im chashecha, if she goes ahead and she makes a neder on Friday night, mefer lo achlo tachshach, he has the ability to revoke her neder until the end of Shabbos. So says the Gemara, V'i amrit, l'tzorach HaShabbos in, shelo l'tzorach HaShabbos lo. Now, if you say that the only time that a husband has the right to revoke his wife's neder on Shabbos is if the neder has Shabbos implications, so my area chashecha. Why are you framing it? I see about say the Mishnah seems to make the entire discussion about time and doesn't focus at all on what? On the nature of the neder. In other words, she made a neder Friday night. How long does he have to revoke it? Until ultimately, again, Shabbos is over. But there's no discussion about what the actual neder was about. So the Gemara, V'i amrit l'tzorach HaShabbos in shelo l'tzorach HaShabbos lo. And if you say that halacha l'maisa, the only type of neder a husband is permitted to revoke on Shabbos is a type of neder which has Shabbos implications. So my area chashecha. Then ultimately, again, why are you framing this? Ultimately, that he has until nightfall on Motzei Shabbos. There's a case, I will say, where even he doesn't have the entire calendar day for neder revocation. What would be that case? That would be a case of where she made a neder, and the neder has nothing to do with Shabbos. Or I should say, the neder has no Shabbos implications. If the neder has no Shabbos implications, then revocation should not be permitted. The Rabbi say, the fact that the Mishnah does not make that distinction indicates to us what? That according to the Mishnah, a husband has the power to do hafara on Shabbos on what kind of neder? any kind of neder. Any kind of neder. So both say, so this is so far. So just want to point out, here's what we have. We have Rav Zuti Debei Rav Papi saying that hafara, neder revocation, only works if the neder has Shabbos implications. So if the wife made a neder that has absolutely no Shabbos implications, husband does not have the right to be mefer that type of neder on Shabbos. Our Mishnah, while not addressing this explicitly, seems to clearly indicate that any type of hafara is permitted. Why? For the simple reason that the Mishnah does not even delve into the topic of the neder. Rather, again, the Mishnah just simply says, a husband has a calendar day in which to annul the neder. Therefore, if she made a neder Friday night, he has until Shabbos night, Motzei Shabbos, in order to go and annul it. And the Mishnah does not address the topic of the neder at all, which seems to indicate that from the perspective of the Mishnah, it doesn't matter. Namely, that a husband has the ability to be made for any type of neder on Shabbos. Now, both say, take a quick look at the Ran. I'll show you something interesting here. So the Ran has a little bit of a different take on this. The Ran says, you see the Ran, it's in the short lines, 1, 2, 3 lines in. Shabbos say, the Ran looks at this differently. The Ran says like this. Let's look at the other case, right? Let's say, what's the other case? She makes a neder. Imagine for a moment again, Shabbos is over at 5:30. She makes a neder at well. The truth is that's not a good example because remember again we spoke about that for Nedarim. When does the day end? Shkia, sunset. Remember again we saw this last 2 weeks ago that for Nedarim the day begins at sunrise and the day ends at sunset. So let's say for argument's sake, okay, sunset is 4:45. Okay, for argument's sake. So I'll say, so what happens? She makes a neder at 4:30. At 4:30 on Shabbos day. So what's the halacha? He could be made for it. Now the Ran says, I don't care what your neder is at 4:30. That neder has no Shabbos implications. Right? Why? Because effectively for Nedarim, Shabbos over in 15 minutes. Right, so the Ran said. So this is so interesting. And this is true by the way. Even if she said, "I'm not going to eat meat. I'm not going to drink," fine. It's 15 minutes left to Shabbos, right? Lamaisa again, it's not. So the Ran says so interesting. The fact that a husband could annul the neder, literally again, she makes a neder 5 minutes before Shabbos is over, and the husband has the power to revoke that. That indicates to us that halacha lemaisa, you could revoke a neder even without Shabbos implications. Look at the Ran. Kevan de'imchashecha nadra ma'tzorach Shabbos yesh ba'farasa. So right, since again lemaisa, she can make a neder right before Shabbos is over, and he could annul that neder. That shows that even if the neder doesn't have Shabbos implications, he could annul it. Elavadai afilu shelo litzorech mefer lefi shazman over kediktani shimchash chavalo hefer shuv ein yachal hafer. Fine. So we'll get to this in just a moment. So we'll say. So I'm just pointing out, you can understand the Gemara's proof in two ways. Possibility one is like the Ran, namely the fact that he can annul a neder right before Shabbos is over. Right? She made the neder right before Shabbos is over. He can annul it. That neder has no Shabbos implications, yet he can do it. Although the Pasha Pshat in the Gemara is that what the Mishnah says, since the Mishnah does not at all delve into the topic of the neder, right? The Mishnah doesn't even discuss that. That tells us from the Mishnah's perspective, the topic of the neder is irrelevant. So whether she made a neder that has Shabbos implications, didn't make a neder that made Shabbos implications, husband has power of revocation on Shabbos. Incredible. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Tanaihi. In fact, this is a machlokes tanoim. Rabbi say, what's a machlokes tanoim? Can a husband annul a neder on Shabbos when the neder has no Shabbos implications? That is a machlokes tanoim. So tonight, Hafaras Nedarim Kol Yom, Rabbi Yosef Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Amru Me'esleis. I will say that this is incredible. So this is so fascinating. So I will say, the machlokes tanoim is not simply a machlokes tanoim about whether or not you could annul Nedarim which have no Shabbos implications on Shabbos. Rather, this machlokes tanoim is the original machlokes tanoim, namely, what is the duration for neder revocation? I will say this goes back to the first machlokes you had in this sugya, namely, Tanakama holds, the Rabbanan hold, The Hafaras Nedarim is the entire calendar day. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Eliezer hold that what? It's 24 hours. Watch this. Watch this. Leman Damar Kol Yom in Tfelo. So the opinion that says that the window for neder annulment or neder revocation is a calendar day and no more. Afilu shelo l'tzorech haShabbos mefer. Then you can even annul non-Shabbos relevant nedarim on Shabbos. So we'll say, what's the logic? What's the logic? You have potentially a much smaller window, So because you have a much smaller window, you can't tell a husband that he can't annul non-Shabbos relevant nedarim on Shabbos, because otherwise he may lose out on the entire window. However, Leman da'amar me'es la'es, but the opinion, i.e. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Eliezer, who hold that you have a 24-hour period, so l'tzorach HaShabbos in, shelo l'tzorach HaShabbos lo. You could annul Shabbos-relevant nedarim on Shabbos, but nedarim which do not have a Shabbos relevance cannot be annulled on Shabbos, and it's not a big deal. Why isn't it a big deal? You'll always have time after Shabbos. So I will say, now again, by the way, even in the Me'es Le'es, can you come to a situation where Lamaisa, technically speaking, if you go ahead and you make a neder right at the beginning of Shabbos, right? Could the Me'es Le'es expire? Yeah, but that would be such an uncommon type of situation. That would be so exact like that. So I will say, it's really quite interesting. So what the Gemara is doing over here is aligning the two machloksim. So there are two machloksim which line up with each other beautifully. Machlokis number one is a general machlokis about what is the window of neder revocation for a husband to a wife. So again, we have the Rabbanon saying that window is calendrical day, calendar day, a yom. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Eliezer, 24 hours. That same machlokis now lines up with, are you allowed to annul or revoke? Are you allowed to revoke non-Shabbos relevant nedarim on Shabbos itself? So again, if you hold that you only have a calendar day for revocation, the answer is yes, right? Because otherwise we're concerned the window's going to close. But if you hold that you have 24 hours, then ultimately the answer is no. Just do it either before or after Shabbos. Incredible. We'll see the resolution of this in just a little bit, Emir Hashem. I said, remember again, we went on finish. So it says, remember again, the Gemara quoted from the Mishnah above. Now I both said the Mishnah in which we started today's daf, which was the Tanan husband, the beginning of Ayin Zayin, is a Mishnah in Shabbos. So that Mishnah in Shabbos continues and says, Vinish Alin l'nedarim she'ein l'tzarach Shabbos. Furthermore, again, you could do She'ela. Now remember again, She'ela is Hataras Nedarim. Hataras Nedarim done with a Chacham, a Talmid Chacham. So you're allowed to do She'ela, you're allowed to do Hataras Nedarim, right, for Nedarim that are Litzorech Shabbos. So we'll say here, the Mishnah is much more specific. So here the Mishnah seems to clearly indicate that Hataras Nedarim can only be done on Shabbos for Nedarim which have Shabbos implications. So we'll say, listen to this. So when is this true? Now, I'll say, remember, what is a major distinction between Hataras Nedarim and Hafaras Nedarim? Major distinction? Time. Time is the biggest one. So remember again, Hafara only has a limited window, right? Once the husband hears of the neder, and remember again, the clock only starts once he becomes aware of the neder, but once he becomes aware of that neder, he's got a day. Okay, smach lokes, is a day a calendar day? Is a day a 24-hour period? But whatever it is, he only has a day. That's very different than she'ela, right? If you make a neder, remember again, the process of she'ela is initiated by the vower. If you've made a neder, and now again, you want to have that neder annulled, what's your window for annulment? What's your window? However you want, however long you want. In other words, we'll say there is no window. Or I should say, there's no statute of limitations on the annulment of that particular neder. See, here's what's interesting. So now what we just said is like this. I make a neder. I'm not going to eat bread or wine. So that's the neder I make, right? So we'll say, so that is clearly a neder that has Shabbos implications. Okay, so now the Mishnah said that I'm allowed to go to a chacham in order to do hataras nedarim for that neder on Shabbos. So now the Gemara asked the following shayla. Ibaylo, kishalo hayalem pnai, oduma kishayim pnai. I will say, when we say that I can do this on Shabbos, what's the case? Is it a case where I didn't have time to do hataras nedarim before Shabbos? So because I couldn't get it done before Shabbos, Therefore, I'm allowed to do it on Shabbos, or maybe not, or maybe, oh, Dilma, Kishalim Panai, or maybe not. Maybe even if I had time, I can still do it on Shabbos. Was it? You hear the Shaila? Hear the Shaila? When we allow you to do Atcharas Nedarim on Shabbos, for a Neder, which has Shabbos implications, is that anytime, whatever I want, right? It's most convenient. I had a busy week. It's most convenient for me to do Atcharas Nedarim on Shabbos. I'm going to save this for Shabbos, or no. You could do it on Shabbos if for some reason you're precluded from doing so during the week. But if you could have done it during the week, you dafka cannot do this on Shabbos. So that's the shayla. So it says the Gemara. So Tashma, is the kiku le Rabbana le Breid Rav Zutra, Breid Rav Zira, afilu b'nedarim shahayelem penayim ve'od yom. So the Gemara answers this with a story. What's the story? That the Rabbanon set aside time for the son of Rav Zutra, the son of Rabbi Zira, to go ahead and annul his Nedarim on Shabbos, even though they had time to do so before Shabbos, which I will say again is pretty good circumstantial evidence to point us in what direction. That halacha l'maisa, hataras Nedarim, for Nedarim which have Shabbos implications, can be done on Shabbos, even if what? You had time to do it before Shabbos. So you could purposely go ahead and delay hataras Nedarim to Shabbos itself. Okay, very interesting. So Savar of Yosef Lamemar, Nish'alim Nedarim b'Shabbos b'Yochid Mumche'in b'Shlosha Yotos Lo. But I want to listen to this. So now, if you just trace this a little bit, right? So far, what have we established? Right, so we've established, we'll say, so can you do Hafaras Nedarim on Shabbos? Can you do Hafaras Nedarim on Shabbos? What's the answer to that? It depends, right? It depends on what? It depends on the machlokes about what the window for hafara is. If you hold the window is me'es le'es 24 hours, you can't do it on Shabbos. If you hold the window is yom, one calendar day, you can do it on Shabbos. What about hataras nedarim on Shabbos? Going to a chacham, could that be done on Shabbos? The answer is, again, it depends. So what does it depend on? Number one, is it a neder which has Shabbos implications? So if it's a neder with Shabbos implications, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. And by the way, the answer is yes, even to the point that what? Even to the point that if you had time to do it before Shabbos, you could intentionally delay it to Shabbos itself. So now, hataras nedarim is permitted on Shabbos as long as the neder has Shabbos implications. So I want to say this is fascinating. Rav Yosef came along and he said, one second, let's frame the process a little bit differently. What type of hataras nedarim is mutter on Shabbos? Only with the Yachid Mumcha. I was talking about this. There are two ways in which you could do Hataras Nedarim. Number one, you could go to an outstanding scholar, Yachid Mumcha, right? Someone who is a Tam Chacham in these areas, or a Beis Din of even 3 laymen, right? 3 regular guys. So listen to this. Rav Yosef said, what type of Hataras Nedarim can you do on Shabbos? Only a Yachid Mumcha. You could do Hataras with an individual. What can't you do? B'shlosha yotos lo. You can't do Hataras Nedarim on Shabbos with a Beis Din of 3 people. Why not? Mishum de mechsi kedina. Wow. Because we both say this looks like a din Torah. This looks like you're adjudicating law. And I both say a Beis Din is not allowed to adjudicate a case on Shabbos. Now, why can't a Beis Din adjudicate a case on Shabbos? So I both say this is a din derabanan, lest you come to right. Ksiva. So this is a din dirabanan in order to safeguard us of kosev, which makes sense. Because I will say often what's part of a din Torah? The dayanim are recording notes, or the dayanim are going to record a psak. So therefore you are not allowed to go ahead and sit in a din Torah or sit for a din Torah on Shabbos, lest you come to right. There's also maybe other potential issues of like mekach memkar, transactional items, but again, we'll just go with ksiva. So I will say, so interestingly enough, so Rabbi Yosef is coming along to say that halacha l'maisa, yes, you could do hataras nedarim on Shabbos if the neder has Shabbos implications, but only the type of hataras nedarim which is done with an individual, not with a Beis Din of 3, because again, that looks like din, and sitting down for adjudication of a case on Shabbos is aser al ksiva, kosev. So the Gemara says as follows: Only Abaye kevan the sfira lan afilu mu'umad afilu bikrovim va'afilu balayla lo mischazik kedina. So Rabbi say this is fascinating. Abaye said no, not true, not true. Since hataras nedarim in general could be done even standing up, since hataras nedarim could be done even with relatives, and since hataras nedarim could be done even at night, it doesn't have the appearance of din. Now I will say this goes back to what we said before, right? That's why I mentioned remember our last Gemara on Ayin Vav Amud Beis, where what was happening when Chia Barav was annulling a neder, right? Was annulling a neder, right? So what was he doing? He was shooting arrows, right? Rabba was sitting, standing. So let's listen to this. So comes along Rabbi Yosef. Comes along. I'm sorry, I just lost the place. Thank you. Good. Abaye, thank you. Comes along Abaye, and since Abaye said, since halacha l'maisa, hataras nedarim is so informal. It's so informal. I'll say, why is it so informal? It could be done sitting, standing. Even relatives could potentially be part of the Beis Din. Could even be done at night. And I will say, now why is all of this true? Why is hataras nedarim so informal? Because they will say, how can one affect hataras nedarim? Charata. So because all I need is charata, I don't need a Pesach. I will say, by the way, I just want to point out, this is what we do by hataras nedarim. Right? By hataras, we'll say, on the Beis Din of hataras nedarim, you could have a relative sitting on that Beis Din. Right? In general, when it comes to matters of adjudication of law, relatives are apostle. For Eidos, relatives are apostle. Yet for hataras nedarim, you could even have your parent, your sibling, sitting on that Beis Din. Rabbi say, what's the lashon of hataras nedarim? How do you affect hataras nedarim? Bekulon is charatna. It's charata. It's charata. That's the whole chap to hataras nedarim. All you need is charata, right? All I need ultimately again is remorse. So because that's all I need, therefore again, I really need a very loose legal framework. So therefore Abaye says, no one is going to mistake hataras nedarim for a din Torah. Right? So therefore again, Abaye felt that you could even go ahead and do hataras nedarim even with a Beis Din of 3 on Shabbos. Now again, remember, the caveat is going to be that what type of neder can you annul on Shabbos? Only a neder with Shabbos implications. This is very important. In other words, you can't do hataras nedarim for anything, but a neder with Shabbos implications can be annulled even with a Beis Din of 3. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, halacha mefirin nedarim balayla. So what's this? Rabbi Abba said in the name of Rav Huna, said in the name of Rav, the halacha is you could do hafaras nedarim even at night. I will say so again. Now we're jumping back now. We jump back, right? So this is now hafaras nedarim. Right? Hafaras nedarim could be done even at night. So again, a father could annul his daughter's vow, right? Or revoke, right? A husband could revoke his wife's vow. So the Gemara says, one second, Bahamas nisinhi, nojar balele Shabbos. So we'll say, okay, that's fine. It's not such a big chiddush. We learned this in the Mishnah. What did the Mishnah say? Even if she makes a neder on the night of Shabbos, he could revoke it. Oh, you're right. The halacha wasn't that you could do hafaras nedarim on the night. I will say, what was the halacha? You could do hataras nedarim at night. Hataras nedarim. That halacha l'mais again, whether you're going to a yachid mumche, an individual, or whether you're going to a Beis Din of 3, that could be done even at night. So now listen to this. Now I want to point out, Rabbi Abba was ultimately again quoting from Rav Huna, who quoted from Rav, that you could even do hafaras nedarim at night. Hataras nedarim at night. So Rabbi Abba Rav Huna. So Rabbi Abba said to Rav Huna, Amar Rav Hachi, did Rav actually say this? What he was asking is, did you hear Rav say this? That hataras nedarim could be done at night. Amar Le Ishtek. Yeah, what happened was, someone said this in front of Rav, and Rav was quiet. So somebody said in front of Rav, hataras nedarim can be done at night, and Rav was silent. And I will say, silence is acquiescence. That's what we're assuming over here. The fact that he was quiet and he didn't object means that he agrees with this. So I'll say, this is great. Amar Le. So Rabbi Abba responded back to Rav Huna, Ishte ka'amrit, o shasi ka'amrit. See, Rabbi say this is very interesting. There are two different types of silence, right? If you take a look, Rabbi say, take a look at the Ran. It's the last 4 lines of the Ran, right after the period, in the fourth to last line, fourth line up from the bottom. V'istigarsi, the second version of the Ran. V'istigarsi, Amr Rav Hachi, Amr le Ishtik, Amr le Ashken Kamrit, O Ishtikan Kamrit, Amr le Tasha the Amr Danavi, Gava Hachi Perusho, Amr Rav Hachi, so Amr Rav Hachi, Rabbi Abba Sha'al Rav Huna. So Rabbi say, so Rabbi Abba says, so Rav Huna says like this. Rav Huna said that someone said in front of Rav that you could do Hataras Nedarim at night. At night. So what did Rav Huna say? Rav Huna said, yeah, someone said in front of Rav and Rav was silent. Fine. So Rabbi Abba says to Rav Huna, one second, there are different things that silence could mean. He says, Im Shama Meirav Beferish. So did you hear Rav actually say this halacha? Veheshiv lo, Rav Huna said, no, I never heard Rav say it explicitly. Instead, what did I hear? Amar Kamei Rav, the Rav Shasak. So again, I'll say, so just to get this clear, Rav Huna quotes this halacha in the name of Rav, namely, that she could do Hataras Nedarim at night. So Rabbi Abba says, okay, Rav Huna, did you hear Rav say that? Rabbi say, by the way, we have conversations like this all the time, right? Oh, so-and-so said something. Did you hear them say that? Did you actually hear them say those words? So ultimately, Rabbi Abba says to Rav Huna, did you hear Rav say that Hataras Nedarim could be done at night? To which Rabbi Abba said, well, so you could hear this conversation happening. To which Rabbi Abba said, well, no, he didn't exactly say it, right? But rather, again, someone said it in front of him, and Rav was quiet. So V'shalom Rabbi Abba Rav Huna, so Rabbi Abba said, one second. Okay, so let's talk about this. So now, first of all, Rav never said it, right? Rav was quiet. Hadishasak lecha Rav, mishum dehodla dvarecha, ke'adam ha'omer lechavero, ashkiyacha. So I will say there are different things that silence, right? So was it like the type of silence of acquiescence? For example, I go over to Ruvain. I say, Ruvain, here's a cup of wine, right? And Ruvain is silent, accepting the cup of wine. So sometimes silence could mean agreement. Or sometimes a person is silent and displeasure. That Rav doesn't say anything, and Rav counted on you being enough of a chacham to recognize that his silence was not acquiescence, his silence was displeasure. So I will say, so this is incredible. So now you have Rabbi Abba asking back to Rav Huna, was the silence like the type of silence by drinking, where someone offers you a glass of wine and you don't have to say anything? I'm in, right? I'm in. I'm accepting that. Or was the silence almost like a certain indignation about how can you see such a thing like that? And the fact that Rav didn't respond indicated his displeasure with this ruling. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Ika bar Avin is dakik le Rav le Rabba bikituna amud beis bikituna de Rav. So Rabbi says, now listen to this. So the Gemara says, Rav Ika bar Avin said, So Rav Ika bar Avin said there was an episode where ultimately again Rav went ahead and did Hataras Nedarim for Izdakik le Rav le Rabba bikituna de Bei Rav. So ultimately again Rav did Hataras Nedarim for Rabba in one of the rooms of the base medrash. And Rabbi say this happened when? At night. So the Gemara answers with a story where Rav himself did Hataras Nedarim for someone at night. Okay, so Rabbi says so that's a pretty good indication that halacha l'maisa, that Rav was in fact fully on board with this halacha, and that his silence represented an acquiescence. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. So the Gemara says, Omeid. Actually, Rav Omeid Yechidi Ubalayla. So that's the end of the sentence, right? Rav did this Hataras Nedarim how? First of all, Rav was standing. Number two, he did it by himself. And number three, it was at night. Okay, so let's say, so we got, it's a 3-for, right? So we got everything. So that indicates to us that what? That Rav holds that halacha l'maisa, Hataras Nedarim, number one, can be done at night. That was the core question. It also tells us it can be done alone, which again is not a chiddush, and ultimately standing. Now, we'll say once again, what does standing represent? That it doesn't require an intense level of concentration. Now, why not? Because what's all you need for Hataras Nedarim? Charata, beautiful. Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Nachman, halacha, nish'alin Nedarim, omeid, yechidi, ubalayla, ubeshabes, ubekrovim. Okay, so Rabbi says, now comes along Rabbi, says the name of Rav Nachman, that what's the halacha Rabbi say? Nish'al, Hataras Nedarim, it could be done by an individual. It can be done at night. It can be done on Shabbos, and it can even be done by relatives. And not only that, even if they had time, before Shabbos, all of this can get done on Shabbos. I will say the one caveat still seems to be that what? What type of neder? What type of neder? Ultimately, again, neder that has Shabbos implications. But if the neder has Shabbos implications, again, you could do it at night, you could do it as an individual, you could do it on Shabbos, even if you had time to do it before Shabbos. Vatanya, we learned. So we'll say, but 1 second. Now, the Gemara is challenging this Omed piece. So we'll say, so the common theme, and this was the theme that began on Ayin Vav Amud Beis, that all Hataras Nedarim really needs is Charata. So because all the Chacham needs, in order to go ahead and say mutar lach, is for the vower to express remorse. I regret having made the neder. So I will say, so because the threshold, because the bar is so low for Ataras Nedarim, therefore again it doesn't really require the concentration of the Yachid Mumcha, the Talmid Chacham, the sage who is going to annul the neder. But is that true? V'hatanya, we learned. Rabbi Gamliel min Achamar, v'nisatev v'yashav v'hiter lo nidro. I also have a story where someone came to Rabbi Gamliel ultimately again for Ataras Nedarim. So we'll say what happened. The person approached Rabbi Gamliel and he was sitting on his donkey. What did Rabbi Gamliel do? He dismounted, he got off his donkey, he sat down, or I should say he wrapped himself in his talus and he sat down. And then he was matter the neder, which I will say seems to indicate to us. So what was Rabbi Gamliel doing? What was he doing? Concentrating. He was concentrating. So dismounting the donkey, wrapping himself in a talus, sitting down, which seems to indicate to us that a Taras Nedarim requires significant concentration. So what's going on over here? So we just got finished saying that the halacha is you could even go to be matter Nedarim even standing up. Here we're saying you have to sit down requires concentration. So I will say to which the Gemara says Savar, Rabbi Gamliel Savar, post and I will say, I just want to draw your attention over here that the Bach changes the girsa over here. The girsa according to the Bach is Rabbi Gamliel Savar, Ein Poschen Becharata, Rabbi Gamliel Savar Poschen Becharata. So we'll say the Bach totally changes the girsa. So again, the way to read it is Rabbi Gamliel Savar, Ein Poschen Becharata. So I will say, so again, Rabbi Gamliel holds, and we'll say, this is a machlokes that goes back to the beginning of this Masechta. Rabbi Gamliel holds, charata is not enough. What do you need? In order to annul a neder? What do you need? A Pesach. What's a Pesach, Rabbi say? What's a Pesach? Information that had I known then what I know now, I would have never made the neder. Okay, so that's a more involved process. So that's already someone coming over. So we'll say, so the way that works is, Rabbi, right? Somebody comes over to Rabbi Gamliel, says, Rabbi, I want to have my neder annulled. Okay, so let's sit and talk. Why do you want your neder annulled? And there's a process. Is there any new information that had you known then what you know now, you would have not made it? So that's a conversation already. I will say. So I just want to point out the big difference between charata and Pesach is just a conversation. Charata doesn't really require a conversation. We're both saying, what happens with charata? What happens with charata? Someone comes before the Yachid Mumcha. What do they say? I regret having made the neder. What does the Yachid Mumcha say? Right, Motulach, have a great day. Right, have a great day. Right, so we'll say Pesach is a much more about, so Rabbi Gamliel holds, ain't posting the charata. Charata is not enough, you need a Pesach. Okay, so that's why somebody approached him for Ataras Nedarim. He needs to get off the donkey, wrap himself in the talus, sit down, and find a real Pesach. On the other hand, Rav Nachman holds that poschin becharata, to which the Gemara says, Rabbi Gamliel Savar, ein poschin becharata, me'ikar nodrei ba'inan, ubaye iyunei, ahachi yashav. So we'll say, so ultimately Rabbi Gamliel holds, charata is not enough. Rather, again, you need a Pesach. So therefore, that requires iyun. That requires a real delving and conversation, discussion about the charata. That's going to require concentration. That's why he gets off the donkey, wraps himself in the talus, and sits down. Conversely, Rav Nachman Savar, poschin becharata, afilu mu'umad. Therefore, I will say again, Rav Nachman says, halacha l'maisa, you could even create a Pesach through charata. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, you don't need to sit down. Hataras nadarim could even be accomplished standing up. Incredible. So I'll say, so Amrli Rav Nachman, so I'll just point out over here, just before we get into this last part, the Rambam Paskins in Hilchos Shvuos, it's actually in Hilchos Shvuos, Perek Vav Halacha Vav. Hakrovim ksherim lahatrin nadarim u'shvuos, umatirim balayla u'mu'uma. So I'll say, so first of all, halacha l'maisa, hataras nadarim could happen with relatives. Hataras nadarim could happen at night, and Hataras nadarim could happen standing up. What does that tell you, Rabosai? Why is all of that true? Because how can you be matir a neder? Charata. Charata. So Rabosai makes perfect sense. Now that all that I need is simple remorse. Rabosai, this is so beautiful because like so many things are now coming together. All I need for Hatar, so Rabosai, remember again, this is Hatara, not Hafara. Hafara is between a husband and a wife, a father and a daughter. This is Hatara. I made a neder, I want to get out of it. I need either one of two things: a yachid mumcha, a talmid chacham, or three regular guys to constitute a beis din. But the mechanism for hatar sadarim is simple: charata. All I need to do is come and voice my remorse for having made the neder, and it becomes mutter. Therefore, because it's not a formal, so to speak, din Torah, it's a loose beis din. What's a loose beis din? Even relatives, even standing up, even at night. She'ein ha'heter hazeh din. Rabbi say, there it is. The Rambam says it. Because hataras nedarim is not a din Torah. It's not a din. It's not a din. Rabbi say, hataras nedarim is not the adjudication of a legal case. It's a simple, I need to have regret, to have remorse, and I just need to voice that remorse in front of some type of formal body. But it's not considered din. Therefore, because it's not din, lefichach, I will say, this is how the Rambam frames this. Because it's not din, it could happen on Shabbos. Because remember, I will say, if it was din, could you do it on Shabbos? No, why not? Ksiva, right? Because you might come to writing. But because it's not din, it could be done on Shabbos, but with the caveat that the neder in question has Shabbos ramifications, Shabbos implications. In other words, if my neder has nothing to do with Shabbos, then halacha l'maisa, I cannot go ahead and be matir on Shabbos. But if it has what to do on Shabbos, ultimately, im hayu l'tzorach Shabbos, ultimately, again, halacha l'maisa, you can be matir on Shabbos. Kigon, shiatir lo shvuah, so gidesh yochal v'shteim, right? Let's say I made a neder or shvuah, I'm not going to eat or drink today. That's neder with Shabbos implications. Therefore, again, I could do ataras dharma for that on Shabbos. Va'afilu, here it is. Hayu lo p'nai lahad shvas o nidro me'erev Shabbos. I had Friday off. I live by all of us, right? I had Friday off, and I have plenty of time to do Atar Tzarma on Erev Shabbos. The Rambam writes, no problem. Harezem matir b'Shabbos, hoil v'lutar Shabbos. So I will say I can be matir on Shabbos as long as it has Shabbos ramifications or implications. So as long as the neder has Shabbos implications, you could do Atar Tzarma on Shabbos, and Atar Tzarma, I will say, simply requires charata. That's all. Incredible. Very important. Rambam, Shavuos, Vav. Take a look at it. So I'll say, let's go weiter. Amrli Rav Nachman, Chazi Mar, Haime Rabban, and the Asim Mar Rava. So let's listen to this. So Rav said to Rav Nachman, did you see this guy, this Talmid Chacham, who came from Eretz Yisrael? Va'amar, is that Kiku le Rabban lebreid Rav Huna bar Avin, v'sharu le Nidrei. That the rabbis went ahead and helped out the son of Rav Huna bar Avin, and they permitted his Nedarim. So I will say, now listen to this. After they did Hatar, so this is just a story. So right, there was Hataras Nedarim done for the son of Rav Huna. After they did as Hataras Nedarim, in other words, after he did his Charata, and he did his Hataras Nedarim, Amruleh, they said to him, Zil, uboy rachmi al nafsheich. You should go do tshuva. Why? The Chatasa, because you sinned. How did you sin? The Tani Rav Dimi Achod Rav Safra, Kol HaNoder, Af api shumekaimo nikra chote. I will say, by the way, this theme comes up every single week in Daf Yomi. That's what? Any person who makes a neder is called a sinner. And I will say, we've spoken of this concept many times. Why is making a neder such a bad thing? So I will say, on the most basic level, because remember again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has already assered enough. Right? Whatever God wants to be asser, He's already made asser. Plus, He's vested Chazal with the power to make additional protective fences. We don't need to make any more Isurim. Right? Chazal did what they needed. We do not need to make it. Person makes a neder, they are generating additional Isser. They're generating additional Isser. We'll say, what a neder also represents sometimes is a certain level of over overconfidence, being too self-confident. In other words, I will say, so halacha l'maaseh again, because failure to perform a neder ultimately comes with significant consequences. A neder could sometimes even be construed as a demonstration of gaiva, of arrogance. So either, again, you're answering things that you don't need to be asur, or in certain respects, it can even be viewed as a form of gaiva. So they were matter his neder, this son of Huna. But after they were matter his neder, they said, by the way, buddy, go into tshuva, because you should have never gotten yourself into this place to begin with. So I both say, by the way, all of this is true, even if you perform the neder. So Amar of Zvid, Mikra, what's the pasuk? V'chisechta lindar, lo yeh b'chachet. So I both say, so the literal taich of the pasuk is, if you will refrain from vowing, you will not have sin. So what can you infer from that? Halo chadalta, if you did not refrain from sinning, i.e., from making a neder, i.e., you made a neder, igachet, there's sin in the actual making of the neder itself. As I will say, we've seen this many times. Chazal don't want us to make nedarim. They don't want us to make nedarim. Kala noder, afa pishu mekaima. If you made the neder, even though you fulfilled it, nikra chote. Ultimately, again, I will say, which probably just from a hashkafic piece, I will say just very quickly, it's interesting. What's so bad about making nedarim? What is so bad about making nedarim? I will say, so remember again, we spoke this out a little while ago. What's a neder? A neder is an obligation to act, right? And it's an obligation to act a certain way, right? And it could be to refrain from it, but again, it's to act a certain way. So I will say, and what does it do? It creates legal strictures around that form of behavior. I will say, if you need to get something done in life, you should be able to get it done without the formal strictures of a neder. If something is important enough to do, then get it done. If you need a neder to motivate you, what does that tell me? What does it tell me? That I'm not motivated enough to do the things I need to do in life. You shouldn't need a neder to motivate you. If something needs to get done, the job should get done on its own without the legal strictures ultimately. That's why it says, Kala noder, afapi shumakaimo, nikra chote. If you made a neder, even if you fulfilled the neder, you're still called a sinner. Why? Because the fact that I need a neder in order to self-actualize, the fact that I need a neder in order to get the job done means there's something deficient in my personalistic drive for success. Why is it not enough for me to tell myself, move? Why is it not enough for me to tell myself, do? Why do I need the strictures of a neder to propel myself forward in the realm of dynamic activity and accomplishment? That in and of itself, say Chazal, is a personalistic failure. Incredible. Time. So I'll say, stop over for today. We'll pick up at Meretz Hashem. Statue, it's a new sugya tomorrow. Shkarach, I will say. Incredible Gemara. All right, have a great day, everyone.